International Academy. So School of the Future International Academy focuses also on training and communication. You are at the moment of speaking in an event that was that falls into this category. So we try to organize a number of workshops. We try to organize different trainings open to educators around the world. Trainings that we feel that will help educators improve their skills, modernize the way they work into their classrooms, and bring interesting aspects of modern methodology into their lessons. Our last pillar of operations is collaboration and networking. This is where we collaborate with a lot of other educational organizations, schools, networks of schools, and we try to approach more stakeholders and make a difference in the global educational community with the assistance of others. So for today's workshop, we have with us Dr. Lana Belic. I will say a few things for her, but then I'll let her introduce herself. Dr. Belic is an international thought leader. She has been inspiring teachers to experiment with new teaching approaches for more than 20 years now. In terms of education, she holds an MA in Educational and Social Research from the UCL, Institute of Education, and she has merged her knowledge and experience into a PhD thesis on international education at the University of Leicester, UK. She is a program leader for Cambridge International Professional Development Qualifications and a member of Cambridge Assessment Specialists team at the University of Cambridge. Dr. Belic has proven in all these years that she has a digital growth mindset and creativity, and that she has great experience in bringing the newest kind of methodology, ed tech, and whatever, like all the fresh things into their class, into her classes and into her research. So Lana, thank you very much for joining us today. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us. I'll let you introduce yourself and deep dive into social emotional learning. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to share my knowledge and my passion actually with your audience and the teachers around the world. I'm so happy to see so many names. Some of them I cannot even pronounce, but that's a good sign. It means that you come from areas that are far from Europe and European languages. And I'm delighted to have an international audience. So my focus today is indeed social emotional learning. And I prepared a very nice presentation, which I hope is going to be quite interactive and interesting, and is going to engage you so that you don't fall asleep, right? But follow this together with me. Good. Okay, let me share my screen with you. And we are going to dive deep, as Natasha said, right? I hope that you can see my screen right now. Natasha, can you? All right. Okay.
Yes, Lana, we can see it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right. Let me share the full screen here. Good. All right. So social emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, these are the things that I believe bring magic to a classroom. And this is why we're going to talk about it today and explore what is the key to this magic. So let me just go quickly over our learning objectives today. So it is our study time indeed, but we're going to understand the concept of social emotional intelligence. Then we're going to navigate strategies to enhance social emotional learning. And finally, we are going to explore the role of neurotransmitters in relationships. I think that this is going to be quite intriguing. But before we start diving, I'm going to ask you for a favor. I'm going to ask you to either download Mentimeter from these app stores or Google Play. You have these QR codes that you can use, or you can simply use the QR codes that I'm going to share with you as we go along. So I'm going to have like 4 or 5, I forgot now, activities that are going to help you follow me and follow the knowledge path, because this is all about quest for knowledge. Right, okay. So I always like to start my presentations with some intriguing questions, and these questions are very good for your brainstorming and setting your brain into motion. So let me ask you this intriguing question. How do people learn? Now, this is something that I want you to interact with, and therefore I want you to scan this QR code. All right, this QR code is going to take you to Mentimeter. I hope that you can all do that, and I'll do that along with you so that we can see things together. If you don't know how to scan the QR code, you can either use your camera, or you can quickly download some QR scanners or codes that are going to take you to the Mentimeter. Now, if you go there, you're going to see a question: how do people learn? And then you have like a field where you can add your comments. You have about 220 characters, so you can give me as many answers as possible. So you can submit multiple answers. You can type, you can write, it can be just one word, it can be a sentence, whatever you think is important for learning. So how do people learn? Yes, Natasha, thank you very much for sharing this audience in the chat. So let's see what it looks like when you give answers. Right? I learn by highlighting the most important parts and reading everything a few times. When there are some things that I can remember, I write them on some paper, and that helps me to remember better, right? Various ways: reading, maybe writing it down in their words, listening, repeating. Okay, reading, repeating. Someone says, oh, all right, this is good to know. Fantastic. Yes, as you can see, observing. Oh, I like observing. Observing is so important, especially for children. You know, in early years, all they do is observe, and they observe and copy what you're doing. So they become like small copies of their parents. All right, very good. So I would say that most of you said people learn in 3 ways. They learn either by using their heads, and this is what we normally think of learning. When I say learning, people always say, well, I think with my head. But you can also do things with your hands. This is your body, right? Because you learn how to ride a bike, that's also learning. And you learn with your heart. This is where we have social emotional learning, right? In psychology, we normally call these 3 domains of learning: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. So head, hands, and heart are cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. I like this. Did you know this? I hope you did. Very good. Now, when we think about learning, we very often think about Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is very popular in pedagogy, and people who are in education, all kindergarten teachers, lecturers, teaching assistants, and so on, know that Bloom's taxonomy tells us a little bit more about how we progress from lower order thinking skills. These are the simplest thinking skills, right? To more complex skills, which are higher order thinking skills. So sometimes, for example, a lower order thinking skill would be just reading a text or remembering some simple things. And higher order thinking skills might be, you know, something like nuclear physics, something like that, rocket sciences, where you really, really have to think about some other thinking skills, not just the simple ones. But before we go any further, I would really like to see if you understand how you can rank these skills from lower order to higher order. And for that, I'm going to ask you again to grab your phones and to scan this QR code. This QR code is going to take you again to Multimeter, and you're going to be able to see 6 different skills that you have to rank from the highest. So highest is number 1 to lowest. Lowest is number 6. All right, so number 1 is the highest one. Number 6 is the lowest one. Can you do that for me? All right, so the highest thinking skill and the lowest thinking skill. Well, it's changing, it's moving. Let me see, give me your answers. It's changing, all right. Come on, is it difficult? Mm-hmm. Good, good, good. A few more, come on. So number 6, we would say, is the lowest thinking skill. You said it's remembering, and then applying, evaluating, analyzing, creating, understanding. Understanding, you think, is the highest of the thinking skill, right? Okay. Now, let's go back to my presentation and see if you got it right. Okay. So, here it is. The lowest order thinking skill is remembering. It means that basically most of the human beings can remember simple things, like multiplication table. You don't really have to understand multiplication table to be able to remember it, but it's always better if you understand what is happening when you say 2 times 2, for example. But even higher is applying. Applying is actually very important. For example, if you want to teach students how to put things together. And applying is actually the skill that you require to be able to put different subjects together for multidisciplinary teaching and learning. Even more complex is analyzing, because you have to be able to analyze what you've applied. And then you can evaluate that and say, was that good or not good? Was this better or was that better? How can I put all these things together for better results, for better knowledge, for better understanding, for better teaching? And the highest order teaching skill is actually creating. This is where you create new knowledge, where you create new art, where you create new understanding, when you ask new questions and create new answers to the existing questions. But what we didn't know, and what teachers normally do not know, is that this is Bloom's cognitive domain. But if you remember, for learning, we use head, hands, and heart. Cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains. And Bloom has the pyramid for that too. So Bloom says that psychomotor domain goes from imitating as the simplest form of psychomotor learning. This is when I mentioned, like small children, they learn how to walk and play and so on by imitating others, manipulating, precising, articulating, naturalizing. So this is the highest order thinking skill, but in psychomotor domain. Affective domain is similar. So it goes from receiving, responding, to valuing, organizing, and characterizing. I'm not sure if you knew this, but this is a good moment to learn more about Bloom's affective domain and how that works around. So,
congratulations.
All right. Konstantinos, could you turn the sound off? Is it Konstantinos? No? Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's go back and let's see how to teach social emotional skills. Now, this is the trickiest part. When I was in school, or I believe when you were in school, nobody actually taught me social emotional skills. Nobody even mentioned social emotional skills. Schools were only places to learn academically. But I think that this is slowly changing, and that schools have become places where actually we as teachers can help our students grow emotionally and socially, not just academically. So it's very important to acquire and adopt and implement and experiment with social emotional teaching skills. So let's see some of them. So we mentioned that Bloom's affective domain goes from receiving to characterizing. And if you remember, like when we talk about Bloom's cognitive domain, we say, all right, so we can use various action verbs to lead our students towards higher order thinking skills. Well, the same goes for affective domain. We have certain action verbs that help us and our students go from receiving to characterizing. And very often we don't think of them. We don't realize what they are. I'm going to give you a moment just to reflect on these different skills. And then I'm going to ask you a question, right?
Lana, I
Yes.
just wanted to say that everybody who's joining with an open microphone. So people, can you please mute your microphones? Or Lana, then because you are the host, you can mute them if you right click on them.
All right. I have no idea.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's just that because you are the host of the meeting now, we can't do it on our end.
All right. Okay. But I don't know who is now. There are too many people, and I don't know who is not muted.
Is somebody called B has just the letter B? Can you please mute your microphone?
That's it.
Right. Okay. Thank Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right. So let me just go back to this pyramid. So Bloom's affective domain has skills from receiving to characterizing. They might look strange a little bit, but actually they are so familiar to us. It's just that we don't call them this way. But we definitely use some of the action verbs in our teaching and helping students understand where to go. So let me see if you can understand which action verbs you would use for receiving, which action verbs you would use for responding, valuing, organizing, and characterizing. So I have a list of these verbs, but let me explain them to you. So receiving, with this receiver level of attitude, a student shows willingness to listen or get involved. Students listen to teacher, wants to experience, or takes interest of participation. All right, this would be receiving. Let's go with responding. With this response level of attitude, a student reacts and participates actively. Student participates in the group activity, takes part in a debate, or shows spontaneous interest on action or subject. So this would be responding. Do you remember what's the next one? Next one is valuing. So it's not evaluation, it's valuing. With this value level of attitude, the student attaches own values and expresses personal opinions. Student decides worth or relevance of ideas, accepts or rejects or commits to an action. So it has to do something with our value systems. And, you know, most of the values come from the family surroundings, but values change over a period of time. And it's very important that we understand these changes, especially, you know, when they're teenagers and when they are quite moody in their attitudes and their understanding. And one day they have one set of values, tomorrow they have another set of values. So we have to learn how to juggle this and appreciate this as an opportunity to help them grow. The higher order thinking skills is organizing. With this conceptualized value level of attitude, a student reconciles internal conflicts in known emotional setup and develops a new value system. A student qualifies and quantifies personal views, declares personal position with reasons, and identifies their own beliefs. Right? And the highest order thinking skill for social and with this internalized value level of attitude, a student adopts self-belief system and own philosophy. A student is self-reliant, behaves consistently with personal value sets, and own belief systems. Now, let me stop here for a moment. I want you to think about your most emotionally challenging students in the class. Are they socially and emotionally intelligent? Do they have their own set of values? Are they able to learn with their emotions and social skills? Are they distracted by other students who are emotionally and socially at a different level? This is a very crucial moment for teaching. You have to use this as a prompt and start from there when you teach social emotional skills. And developing a set of beliefs in your own classroom, set of values, is very, very important for any further learning and teaching. All right? So now you know all these 5 different levels of skills. Now let's take a look at Mentimeter. In this Mentimeter, I created action verbs for every level of Bloom's affective domain. So you have 5 groups of action verbs, and each group belongs to one of these skills. Can you match them? Can you put them together? All right. All right. So number 1 is for receiving. What would you say are the action verbs for receiving? Listen, attend, discuss, follow, read. Is that receiving? Yes? I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? What is the highest order thinking skill for social emotional domain characterizing? Which action verbs would you use to characterize? We just mentioned the set of beliefs and how empowering it is for students to be able to discuss and explore their own sets of beliefs. Good. Now let's check if you were right. Okay. Oh, it's changing. Last minute changes. Let me see if something is going to change between 3 and 2. All right. Ooh, it's 3 and 4 now. All right. Okay, I thought that 2 and 3 were going to change places, but I think now it's 3 and 4. But let's go back to my presentation and see how it went with you and what the right answers are. So we say that the lowest order thinking skill is receiving. And let me start from number 1 below. It's to listen, attend, discuss, follow, read. So this is all about receiving. Number 2 is responding. So it's like interpret, clarify, contribute, present, perform. Number 3, valuing, that we mentioned as a very important thing, is to argue, refute, confront, justify, criticize. Number 4 is organizing. You develop, formulate, modify, reconcile, compare. And the highest order thinking skill, characterizing, is act, display, influence, solve, and practice. So you would use these action verbs to help your students understand what they're supposed to do. So for example, if you have a subject, say in humanities, you're teaching history, for example, history is very, very good for valuing, organizing, and responding, because it really puts the students into discussion when they can express their attitudes and sets of values without being right or wrong, okay? Because they can stand for their own views and their own beliefs by being able to use argumentative like tools to help express. Very good. Okay, so now that we know this paradigm and Bloom's taxonomy, the affective domain, we can talk about different types and programs and frameworks. My favorite framework is Castle Wheel. This is actually a whole framework that helps schools, districts, states, and others to foster knowledge, skills, and attitudes across 5 areas of social and emotional competencies. It also helps establish equitable learning environments and coordinate practices across 4 key settings that support students' social, emotional, and academic development. CASL is very popular in the United States, and it's also very popular in Europe. And a lot of schools now embrace this as a kind of school culture. And CASL basically permeates into various subjects and helps teachers who teach like even sciences like mathematics and computer science, biology, and so on, to understand what they can do to help their students grow emotionally and socially. So far has been just kind of prejudiced and biased that only humanities teachers can set these values, but it's not true. Everyone can teach social emotional learning. We're all social and emotional beings. So let's see what Castle Wheel looks like. It says, so there are 5 areas that are very important for social and emotional learning. Self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, self-awareness. So these are the things that a CASL brings into action. And normally, this would happen within your classroom. So you teach your students to do something like this. But actually, you know, a lot of classrooms, a lot of teachers create a school culture, right? And the school culture is very important because then students know that, you know, all their friends and all their teachers are going to use the same set of values. And what's important here is that then you can include families and caregivers, all the people who help the children learn socially and emotionally. You can organize special workshops for parents or legal guardians or caregivers, and they can help with social emotional strategies also within the school. For example, in the school where I was a principal, we had a fantastic teacher who organized show and tell for parents. So parents would come to school and present their careers, their products, their services, and the students were able to learn more about different types of careers and maybe consider what they would like to study after that, what they would like to be when they grow up. Also, in the other school where I used to work, families had like evenings together. So instead of taking the children to some playroom or park or something like that, families would come back to school after office hours, and they would let students, their children, play in the playgrounds, but they actually served as a small community of parents that share the same values. And again, when this is all set in families,
I suppose that Lana has some trouble with her connection. She's going to be back very soon. Let's give her a minute. Okay, we apologize for the technical issue. Dr. Belic will be with us again very, very soon. So if you want to, like, meanwhile, we can use the chat to introduce each other. Some people have already started doing so. You can write where you're from. If you have experimented with social emotional learning at all in your schools, use the chat to introduce yourselves. We are a community of trainees that comes from all over the world, so it will be very interesting to see where you people come from. I think Lana might be back. Yes.
Hey guys. Yes.
Sorry, Lana.
My laptop just restarted for no reason. So if you give me just a few minutes, I have to put everything back into action. I'm so sorry. Technology sometimes fails us. I will log out now. All right. And I will be back in like 2 minutes. All right.
That's fine. We are meeting each other. We're introducing ourselves to each other on the chats. Meanwhile.
Fantastic. This is so social and emotionally intelligent.
No stress, Lana. Somebody's asking in the chat box whether they will have access to the video and the PowerPoint presentation. We will share all the materials for this training with you after the end of the event. And also, let's not forget that this event is accompanied with a certification of attendance. So we will send you your certifications after the event is completed. Meanwhile, us, as School of the Future International Academy, we encourage you to contact us with any other needs for training you might have. Let us know what support you need. Let us know more about your schools. We are very, very interested in finding out what is the situation in your schools. We are running at the same time. We are running in March our mentoring program. So if you're a school leader, you are in this presentation and you are interested in one-to-one mentoring from our experts, you can also contact us regarding this. So Lana, do you think you're ready? Do you need some more time?
Yes, I'm ready, but I need you to give me this privilege to share my screen because I lost it now.
Yes, perfect. I think, are you sure you can share your screen?
No, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Now it should work.
All right, yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Yes.
So I wanted to say hi to all. This is so inspiring to see how many different aspects of the world, corners of this world we have gathered here. Thank you very much, guys. George also shared the details for our mentoring program. So the floor is back to Lana. We look forward to hearing what is next.
Yes. So we were talking about castle and different areas that you can use to implement self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness and self-awareness in different pillars in your classroom, in your schools, with your families and caregivers, and finally in your communities. Right? So it's very important that you understand the full array of opportunities that you can use to teach social and emotional skills. Right, very good. Now, let me show you what these areas and pillars look like in the framework. All right, hold on. Phase. So we have these 5 different competencies, sets of competencies, and they also have other like competencies that help us understand, for example, what is self-awareness. So self-awareness is the ability to accurately recognize one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence and the growth mindset. So you help students identify emotions, understand self-perception, recognize their strengths, self-confidence, and self-efficacy. I remember I was watching a wonderful documentary about Finnish education. You know that Finland is one of the best countries regarding not just the academic aspects of teaching and learning, but also social emotional learning. And I remember that, you know, I was quite impressed by a girl who said, you know, previously I was so scared, I had stage frights, and whenever I would step on a stage, I would simply, you know, block and I would become speechless. But now, by learning how to have self-confidence and self-regulation, now I'm able to speak in front of audience, and I do that with enthusiasm and the kind of enthusiasm that helps me establish rapport with the audience. And for me, it was like, wow, this is exactly what I want to have in my students, you know, this opportunity to grow socially, emotionally, and understand how to use and implement that as a kind of competence, a skill, when this is required by, say, a situation in which you are situated, right? Social awareness is the ability to take the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds and cultures. This is the ability to understand social and ethical norms for behavior and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. So when you change different perspectives and develop empathy, you appreciate diversity and respect for others. This is one of the most important things, for example, that we can teach today, you know, with all these social, economic, and political changes in the European landscape. We can really help our students embrace these competencies and use this as a real-life prompt to teach, for example, empathy and diversity and respect for others. Then when we talk about responsible decision-making, this is definitely an ability to make constructive choices about personal behavior and social interaction based on ethical standards, safety concerns, social norms. And this is a realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions and a consideration of the well-being of oneself and others. So if you help students understand how to identify problems, analyze situations, how to solve problems, you know, what strategies to use, how to evaluate that, how to reflect, and how to become more ethically responsible. Now, this is a real asset in your classroom. You really help your students grow socially and emotionally and understand how their own sets of beliefs and ethical standards can influence the society around them. Okay. So let me just go further. We have self-management. So what is self-management all about? It is the ability to successfully regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations, and effectively managing stress, controlling impulses, and motivating oneself. This is an ability to set and work towards personal and academic goals. So if we help students understand, for example, self-discipline and self-motivation, then we can help them also with goal setting and stress management. You know, for example, in our school, we use mindfulness. I don't know if you had an experience with mindfulness before, but I remember that when we started using mindfulness, nobody knew anything about it. the students were like, what does it mean? I don't even know these words. What does it mean? Okay, mind and then full, but what is mindfulness? Like, it does it mean that my mind is full? What is this? And then, with the first workshop, we had just 5 students. And I think those were the students that were curious about, the mindfulness concepts. And then they loved it so much because they were learning about overthinking and stress management and understanding their own personalities and wish lists and so on. And then those students brought other students next time. And eventually, the Mindfulness Club was one of the most attended clubs in our school. The students really loved it. And now that I mentioned something like that, it's also about relationship. Mindfulness is really all about relationship skills, and it's one of Castle's competencies. So when we talk about relationship skills, we say that it's ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. It's an ability to communicate clearly, listen well, cooperate with others, resist inappropriate social pressure, negotiate conflict constructively, and seek and offer help when needed. So these are very important skills for your community: communication, social engagement, relationship building, teamwork, right? Very good. I lost my, here it is. So as I mentioned, Castle framework is very popular in the United States. It's getting more and more popular in Europe. And I do hope that other countries and continents are going to embrace this as an opportunity to teach something really, really valuable to their students. However, there are more frameworks that are probably more convenient for you. For example, culturally responsive teaching is a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. It builds on individual and cultural experiences and their prior knowledge. It needs to be justice-oriented and reflect the social context we're in now. Now, some of you might be teaching in international schools. We have students from all parts of the world, and it's very important that we embrace our differences, and that, sometimes when you make a mistake, when you mispronounce a name, or when you do a faux pas, like, something that's not really socially acceptable in this society in which you work, then we don't have to think about that as a kind of a grave mistake that you've made, but rather an opportunity to learn something yourself and to teach your students to learn, something new. I remember what happened to me was, I had a boy who was Hungarian, and he had a name and a surname that looked like name and name to me, right? So his name was Goran Bogdan. And I was like, okay, I had no idea what was the name and what was the surname. But I always thought, okay, so I'm Lana Belic. So the first one is probably his name, right? So I spent the first few months of my teaching in the classroom addressing him, actually by his surname, because I didn't know that in Hungary, they never present themselves as Lana Belic, but rather as Belic Lana. And it was so awkward because I didn't know that. And it was only that I had, when I had a parent-teacher meeting, that his mother told me, why do you call him by his surname? And I didn't know that. And I felt awkward. But hey, I used that as an opportunity to teach all the other students in the class that it's a different type of social norm in Hungary. And there are probably other cultures that you are familiar with, right? Okay, so culturally, culturally responsive teaching is very similar to CASTLE. It has 4 different pillars: understanding history and culture, community, culture into the classroom, family, and bringing native language into the classroom. I think that sometimes, you know, when you work in international schools, there are schools where you have a large number of local students who speak the language of the in which country you teach, right? And sometimes you're not familiar with this language. Sometimes the other students are not familiar with this language. So bringing in the elements of the native language into the classroom can be very useful for all those who are expats to be able to communicate and socialize outside the school. But also what I particularly like is when you dedicate your lessons to learning more about expressions in other languages. For example, what's the word thank you in different languages, or I love you, or good morning. And then in your classroom, you can use all these elements to help your students embrace, you know, these phrases in different languages. By doing so, you actually show respect to that culture, you show appreciation of their language, and it's also quite enriching in terms of some broader general knowledge. Right, okay. There are some overlappings between social emotional learning skills and culturally responsive teaching. And here I'm not going to go into details, but I'm just going to zoom so that you can see that, for example, some of culturally responsive teaching sets into self-management, right? How you go about that. And for example, self-awareness has these overlappings with cultural responsive teaching. Social awareness and cultural responsive teaching, again, skills like empathy, inclusiveness, perceptiveness, resourcefulness, diversity, they're also in CASTLE. And relationship building, like connection, encouragement, cooperation, discretion, they overlap with CASTLE's relationship skills. Have responsible decision-making, like prudence, respectfulness, integrity, accountability, contemplations. These are all the skills that go into CASTLE as well. And isn't that wonderful? So you put international mindedness with CASTLE pillars, and you get a fantastic interdisciplinary teaching in your school. My favorite one, though, is called Education for Sustainable Development Goals, ESD. It empowers everyone to make informed decisions in favor of environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society for present and future generations. It aims to provide the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values necessary to address sustainable development goals. Now, I believe that most of you are indeed familiar with Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and they focus on various aspects of our society, from climate changes, human rights, living sustainable life in sustainable cities, to education. Education is number 4, for example. Education that is accessible for everyone, everywhere in every country on Earth. So Sustainable Development Goals are very, very important for teaching and for learning and for understanding how to somehow bring these goals into your subject teaching, content teaching. For example, if you teach biology, you might use number 14, which is life underwater. So, or 15, which is like life on the land. So you might put these sustainable development goals into your own classroom content lessons and bring that together. Very good. If you want more information about this, I would suggest to use Education for Sustainable Development Goals handbook. It is issued by the United Nations. And you can find that on their website. It's free of charge. You don't have to buy it or anything like that. And there you're going to find quite a lot of wonderful ideas to implement these learning objectives into your own teaching and students' learning. Right? Good. Excellent. So, now that we know a little bit more about what is social emotional learning, what types of frameworks we've got to help us understand how to implement this in the classroom, I would like to show you one last thing, and this is actually what is happening in your brain, in your student's brain. And what is the role of neurotransmitters in social emotional learning? Let me just explain what neurotransmitters are. These are chemicals that are somehow released in your brain when you have certain stimuli. And they affect your behavior, your emotions, even your physical needs like hunger and sleep, you know. So they are very important in learning as well. We say that there are happy brain chemicals, and they are the 4 chemicals that are the most important for social emotional learning. Number 1 is dopamine, so is oxytocin. 3, serotonin, and number 4 is endorphin. I don't know if you've heard about them before, but if you haven't, this is actually the time when you're very good. So for that, before we go further into diving, I would actually like to see if you know anything about them. And for that, I'm going to ask you now to grab your phones again and scan this QR code. It is going to take you to your Multimeter, where you have a picture of these 4 transmitters, and then you have a list of 4 descriptions. So match your description to the name of the neurotransmitter. So put them together. This is a matching activity. So what's number 1? Let me see what you're going to respond here. All right. Number 1. Oh, okay. Number 1 is changing. Hormone. Number 2, love hormone. Number 3, happiness hormone. Number 4, euphoric hormone. Come on, a few more answers. You can do this for me. All right. Well, I've got to tell you that you did it very well. Dopamine is indeed a reward hormone. It enables motivation, learning, and pleasure. And dopamine is very important when you praise your students, when they do something very well and you say, bravo, that's it. I'm going to give you 5 points for that, or I'm going to give you an A for this activity, or something like that. This is going definitely to help them release dopamine. Number 2 is oxytocin. It said that it's love hormone. It enables bonding and care. And oxytocin normally happens between family members, especially between mummy and baby, when they're cuddling and so on. But oxytocin also happens when you're bonding with your friends, with your teacher. It creates that positive rapport that is very important for healthy relationships. Serotonin is said to be a happiness hormone. It makes you feel good about yourself. And this is something that you do when you feel like, woo, I really like this movie, or I really like jogging, so you go jogging, right? Endorphin is euphoric hormone. It alleviates pain and stress and depression. And it's very important because it's somehow, it's complementary to other three because it levels them up. If you're too happy, then the euphoric hormone levels that emotion down. Very good. Now, sometimes we say that we have certain deficiency of these hormones. For example, you would definitely realize that you lack dopamine if you if you're low on your self-esteem, when you lack motivation, when you are low on energy or feel fatigue, and it's just a sign that you are low on dopamine. When you're low on oxytocin, as I mentioned previously, oxytocin is a love hormone, so you feel lonely, you're stressed, you're disconnected of relationships. It's just, you don't feel like doing anything. Serotonin, very similar to these, makes you feel overly sensitive. You have problems, with your sleep. Insomnia is that you're feeling hopeless. You're just unhappy about everything. Endorphin creates depression and mood swings, aches and pains, and impulsive behavior. So if you're able to understand that you lack one of these 4 crucial happy brain chemicals, there are ways to help you stimulate them. For example, if you want to stimulate dopamine, then you would meditate, you would set long-term goals, exercise, you would create something that makes you feel good about it and you see instant results. Now, sometimes dopamine stimulation is rather fleeting because it's a short-term kind of happiness, right? Oxytocin you can stimulate by physical touch, socializing, massage, acupuncture, listening to some nice music. I'm not really sure about these cold showers, but you can give it a try and see how that goes with you. Serotonin helps you, is stimulated when you exercise, and again you have cold showers, sunlight, massage. Also, nature's delights. If you go out and enjoy a walk in the park, this is going to make you feel really stimulated, be able to release serotonin as well. Endorphin is released when you create something that makes you feel like, wow, I'm so overwhelmed by this emotion. And I particularly like dark chocolate. I think that if you like dark chocolate, that you're never going to be short on endorphin. Excellent. This is very important. So here is a test for you. I'm not going to use Menti, but I want you to be engaged with me, all right? So my question is, what happens and what kind of a feeling you're going to have if you're very, but really, really very high on dopamine? What is going to happen? believe it or not, you're not going to be just overly enthusiastic about the world around you. You're going to be schizophrenic. And if you're very low on dopamine, it's different kind of like opposites kind of feeling. It's anxiety. How about having the right level of serotonin? This is an easy one. And I'm sure that you know the answer. It's happiness, right? Serotonin is a happy hormone, and the right level of serotonin creates happiness. And if you're low on dopamine and low on serotonin, well, but what happens if you have the right level of dopamine, the right level of serotonin, and the right level of oxytocin? What's happening then? Well, it's a magic potion for love. Very good. Now, in this presentation, we actually explored your social emotional intelligence and how you can use this magic in your classroom, right? So we say that in this short presentation, I hope that I helped you understand the concept of social emotional intelligence, and that you are now able to say, yes, I now understand the concept of social emotional intelligence. Then we talked about different strategies to enhance social emotional learning. We talked about CASTLE. We talked about interculturally responsible teaching. And we talked about sustainable development goals and how you can use them in your teaching and learning. And finally, we explored the role of neurotransmitters in relationships, because they're very, very important for you to know and understand any kind of strengths and weaknesses that you have in your classroom, how you can either recognize and stimulate different types of neurotransmitters. And I have the last for you, right? A last activity for your Mentimeter, so please help me. I want to see what is your daily dose. Dose is an acronym for these 4 neurotransmitters. So D is for dopamine, O, oxytocin, S, serotonin, and E, endorphin. So I want you now to tell me on this scale that I made for you, where is your level of dopamine, your level of oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin? Let me see how you feel about your social emotional learning today. All right. You look very happy today. Serotonin is high. Dopamine is high as well. Very good. Excellent. Well, I'm happy that you're happy. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. All right. So with this last slide, I would like to close my presentation, and I would like to open the floor for you and for your questions about social emotional learning. Feel free to either ask me something about this presentation or something about your particular environment, setting, classroom, students, colleagues that you might have around.
Thank you so much, Lana. That was very, very interesting, very, very useful. I'm already thinking of new things teachers can bring into their classrooms based on what you shared with us. Even the last activity, I wrote it on in the chat. It can become an activity in its own right, like teach our students about neurotransmitters and then ask them to assess their levels every day or regularly. And that, I guess, helps with self-awareness as well, that you spoke to us about earlier.
Definitely. If you help your students understand their emotions and understand how to express their emotions, it's very important. For example, one of the most important strategies that you would use is that students don't say, I'm sad, but rather, I feel sad. So they do not identify with sad, saying, I am sad, but I feel sad. And when they use these words, feelings are changeable. It means that then they can change their own feelings. This is a sort of emotional agility that is very important. Emotional learning, and when they realize that, they're going to be able to control their own emotions and motivate themselves to be happy.
We were very interested in what you said about mindfulness in the beginning of your presentation. So people who are in the meeting now, if you're interested in Dr. Belic coming to speak to us more about mindfulness and the way she used it in her school, please leave a comment or email us, and we will make sure that we bring her back for more details on this.
We can even have a mindfulness session so that you can realize what it's like. I remember when we organized this mindfulness session for teachers so that teachers understand what this was all about, you know, our computer science teacher was like, you know, rolling his eyes like, this is so boring, you know, I don't feel part of that. And then you can see, for example, geography teachers saying, oh, this is so great, you know, I never thought about this. I remember there was an activity where the instructor said, okay, I want you now to close your eyes and I want you to focus on the sounds around you. What is it that you can hear? And some people said, I can hear birds, or oh, I can hear some child laughing in the distance. And you know, I was a school principal and all I could hear was tick, tick, tick. I could hear a clock. And so sometimes we're not really aware of what's our pressure and what is our stress until that moment when you have to really focus on certain things that are important for you. And for me, it was time. So sometimes, yeah, it's so a wonderful
interesting. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm reading the comments at the same time. We have kept you a bit longer than we hoped for, but that was so interesting. We couldn't get enough. We promised to come back with more with Dr. Belic. We loved your presentation. Thank you very, very much. I think all of us, we get out of this workshop with a lot of ideas that we can bring into our classrooms. First thing tomorrow morning. Feel free to contact us if you are not sure how to implement all of these things in your classrooms, in your classes, I mean, and we will make sure to share with you more practical tips on activities you can do. And please comment that we can and enable us to bring Dr. Belic back for another workshop. For those of you that we really love you, Dr. Belic. The last thing I wanted to point out is that some of you joined this meeting from the post we did on LinkedIn earlier, so we do not have your email addresses. If you feel we don't have your email address, please send it to us in the chat box now. Some of you have done already, so thank you very much, because we needed to share with you the recording and the presentation of today's meeting. Feel free to contact us with any other ideas or needs you have for professional development, either for you, the leadership team of your school, or the educators. We are very open to suggestions, and we do have an expert for practically every aspect of a school's operation. We would be very happy to see you again in one of our next events and workshops. Thank you very much, Dr. Belic. We'll see you soon. Bye. Bye, everybody.